Dr. Culler, how would you describe the concept of brain rot?
I went back to the blog I wrote earlier this year that just caught my eye. It was Oxford Dictionary's word of the year last year. So I turned to them for the definition, and they defined it as the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, especially due to overconsumption of trivial or unchallenging material, often related to our online content consumption, typically linked to social media. So a lot of people may have heard this called as like the TikTok brain is the
Yeah.
most commonly way that it's dubbed. But it also highlights how constant digital stimulation negatively impacts our cognitive function as well as our overall mental health and well-being.
Yeah. So, it's a problem when it becomes the word of the year for Oxford. You know what I mean? Okay. So, spitting off that, like, what parts of a person's brain functioning normally gets impacted the most when they constantly consume what they call, brain rot content?
Yeah, so part of it made me also think of like the other buzzword that I think a lot of us probably heard in relationship to brain rot or the TikTok brain is likely the doom scrolling. So what happens when we're kind of caught in that brain loop of why do our fingers keep going like this on the videos, or all of a sudden how is it that we've sat down with 5 minutes and next thing you know an hour later of our time has gone by. So the first thing that happens is it's caught our attention and the time has lapsed. So it's basically what it's designed to do is hook our attention. And it's also captured some of our memory as well. When you're not paying that full attention, you don't remember what you've watched, right? Have you ever done that
Hmm.
as well? You've watched a bunch of videos and then you're just like, you don't, not even able
Yeah.
to tell somebody perhaps
Yeah.
what you've just watched. You've kind of just been in
Hmm.
that mindless state where you're not fully engaged. It's just more that passive watching. It also puts
Hmm.
some strain on your decision making. A lot of times we may have all of a sudden just clicked on something and bought it and not really sure why. A lot of the ads are
Hmm.
targeting us for some of that information, or a lot of the influencer marketing too. All of a sudden give us this hype of like we need this product and we're not essentially sure what even the product does, or do we really have the need of what they've just tried to convince us or they showed us looks really neat in the video. But it can lead to sometimes that decision making, which may be from some of the fatigue we've had, especially as a lot of us may tend to do this doom scrolling late at night when we're tired and we're fatigued from the day. So it plays into a lot of different areas in our brain where kind of our impulse or normal decision making or rationale, when we're more at our peak, we might be able to hit the brakes and stop
Hmm.
and think through it with more intentionality, or say, okay, that's neat, but do I really need it? No, and we move on. Or we're able to actually stop once we realize we're in this loop of, okay, I've really wasted my time here. I'm going to move on to the next task. But we don't realize that. We've kind of been over flooded with those little hits of dopamine, and we just keep going, kind of, as I like to say, the proverbial rabbit hole. We've just kept going down that loop. So a lot of that, some of that disorganization that happens from our attention, we've lost it. Our brain being somewhat fatigued and not realizing where all of our time has gone. And I think many of us may have been guilty of this
Hmm.
in one way or another. I won't judge on maybe the time if you reflect back at a moment when you've gone by, how much time you may have wasted in just one doom scroll, or quickly how it can happen. And so sometimes it's that unpredictability of our brain not realizing we don't have these stops in place or habits and skills to do that awareness check in to say, hey, we need to stop now, or this is a good time.
Hmm.
And I know we're going to talk through some tools and strategies that people can use, but I challenge some listeners now just to reflect on times where this may have happened to you and how you felt in those moments, or especially how you felt afterwards. A lot of times when this has happened, we feel really cruddy after that doom scroll.
Yeah.
Or not, we're not feeling good. If we did a mental check-in, where we tend to report a lot of negative emotions, whether it's depressed, feeling more anxious, feeling not good about ourselves because we compared ourselves to other social comparisons. So it can be negative body image, or thinking, why don't I have these things of people that we have never seen? We don't usually see inside celebrities' homes. So why would we ever think that our homes or our closets or our wardrobe should look like that? But we all of a sudden now have access to other people's lives on a daily basis. And we do a lot more comparison, and we tend to think and compare ourselves to them. And that can bring up a lot of negative emotions as well. So we tend to end up feeling more on that negative spectrum versus leaving social media or a lot of those doom scrolls
Hmm.
feeling more reporting able positive emotions, saying like, oh, well, I felt good, or hey, I learned something new, or I can go try this now. We tend to not report more of those positive things. So I encourage people to do that type of check in as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so like it seems like the like main two things that it really impacts is like your um processing speed and your ability to like make good choices, your memory, and just like it really compromises your ability to be sharp, right? So here's the thing, like what would you consider like brain rot content? Because brain rot is kind of a word that's kind of shown up over the past like 2, 3, 4 years, right? Like it's rather recent. So I'm going to assume it's more for the short term or short form content, right? But why would that be different from, let's say, something like movies or, like a TV show? What would be the difference between those two in terms of content consumption?
I think for a lot of it, if we think even back historically, it's marketing. It's something that's attention grabbing, and it's meant to grab your attention and kind of hold you in. And now we've learned our attention spans have become much shorter and more compressed. And so if you think about a long time ago, there used to be television ads, and they would get louder because they know people would leave the room when they would be watching TV. And
Yeah.
now so much of this is just like you said, it's short form content on TikTok and across all the other apps. And it's short because our attention spans have gotten a lot shorter. So if they don't get the hook, they know now you're in control because you can scroll. Before, you didn't really have the option. At worst, you could do on television was change the channel, but now you can quickly scroll through lots of videos, or you can now pay to bypass a lot of ads. So essentially, I like to think about most of it is anything when it comes to advertising is your attention is what's for sale. And that's the way all these
Hmm.
algorithms are working and changing. And if you're looking at how all the content has changed over years, it's to get your attention. And as it's becoming shorter, it's becoming more of the prize. And the way the platforms are incentivized is how long can they keep your attention on that particular platform? Or even for that influencer, how many of their videos do you watch and engage with? That's how they're getting some of their reimbursement, or they're incentivized for their audience as well. And so your attention is what's for sale. And I think just recently, I don't quote me for 100%, I'm not a Swiftie by
Yeah.
any means, but Taylor Swift just went viral with a clip about that, of just kind of saying that, like, you have to realize that your attention is a luxury item to an extent, and to realize that we have to be careful of where it goes, and to have
Hmm.
more mindfulness around that, which I know we're getting to a lot more later in this conversation. But just that
Yeah.
beginning level of awareness, I think many of us don't realize, because they have lots of engineers. They have whole teams that are figuring out the
Yeah.
neuroscience of this, of how to exploit you. And they do it in fun games that make you want to spin the wheel, or make you want to play the game to unlock something and to keep you there. And that's what they're being incentivized to do. And we're not always thinking about that, because we might be on there for a break and some lighthearted fun, and as we're unlocking more and more things, we have just spent more and more time on that content, unintentionally or intentionally, so to speak. But to be mindful of that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the human brain kind of, like evolved to think deeply about things, right? And to focus, right? It's not kind of wired to just, have these random 5 second, 7 second clips that are not, making you think deeply about what you just saw or what you learned. So you're working against the way the brain is wired, right? So like that's probably why you feel kind of tired and exhausted after you're done scrolling, because it's just like it's not working with the way your brain is wired. Because if you engage in real learning, like you'll feel like this sort of high that comes with learning, you know what I mean? Because like you'll feel that stimulation which you don't really get from like short form content, right?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I think, especially for adult learners or as we're aging in general, plus, anything essentially past high school, as we're getting into adulthood and with learning, is typically once we get information, we think about how does this apply or relate to us in our lives? Like, what can I
Yeah.
do with this information? Or who could I tell? Like, who might this be helpful for? A friend? A colleague, a family member. We're always thinking about that. And our brain wants to make those connections, just like you said. It's holding
Hmm.
on, like, if I can't use this now, this might be helpful, especially if you're thinking about your early career. This might not be the job tip I need now, but this would be helpful for me to know in my next role or the next project I'm on. You can see all types of hacks online. Like, you can learn great life tips or something about social media. Like, this is great for me to
Yeah.
know and apply on my next project. So you put that in your memory, so to bank, so to speak, to pull it out in the next time. And that's what your brain's looking to do with a lot of information. And the other information, at some point where you're like, it's not for me, it doesn't serve its purpose. Your brain's not putting in that effort to hold on, and it's just letting it go. And like you said, it can get kind of mind numbing after a while, where you've spent
Yeah.
a significant chunk of time being understimulated. Our brains don't like that. We have to find that right level of stimulation, and we need some of that to relax. Just like we don't want to be overstimulated for excessive periods of time, we need that area of zone where we thrive, where we
Yeah.
have that right level of engagement. And just like you said, where we leave feeling those positive emotions of like, hey, I learned something I can go do and act on with this new information now. And it's okay if I didn't get all of the great information, but I can let that go. Not that we've spent an hour of our day every day on content that isn't going to serve us in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Now,